In this video, we'll discuss the joint Nazi-Soviet invasion of Poland. And I'll answer an oft-repeated question on this topic. Why did Stalin also invade Poland? To answer the video's title question, we need to go back in time and contextualize the European scenario in the late 1930s. Post-World War I Europe was mired in uncertainty. Germany, humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, sought to regain its position as a world power. With Adolf Hitler's rise to power in 1933, the country adopted an aggressive policy of territorial expansion, openly defying the European powers and the restrictions imposed after the Great War. On the other side, the Soviet Union, under Stalin's command, faced its own internal and external challenges. Internally, Stalin implemented policies of accelerated industrialization and agrarian collectivization, often at the cost of great human suffering. Externally, the Soviet Union sought to ensure its security against the growing Nazi threat, with Stalin dreaming of recovering territories lost after the 1917 revolution. This was a matter of honor for the Soviet leadership. Poland, re-established as an independent nation in 1918, occupied a strategic geographic position between these two great powers. The country possessed territories that had historically belonged to both Russia and Germany, becoming a focal point of interest and tension. Meanwhile, the Western powers, still licking the terrible wounds left by the Great War, adopted a policy of appeasement toward Nazi Germany, hoping to avoid another large-scale conflict. This stance, however, left Poland in a vulnerable position, without concrete guarantees of support in the event of aggression. And it is in this context that we arrive at the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. On August 23, 1939, the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany surprised the world by announcing a non-aggression treaty. Signed by foreign ministers Vyacheslav Molotov and Joachim von Ribbentrop, the pact included secret protocols that divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. But there were several reasons that motivated Stalin to sign an agreement with his greatest ideological enemy, beginning with security considerations. Stalin was keenly aware of the threat posed by Nazi Germany. Despite ideological differences, he recognized that a direct confrontation at that time would not be advantageous to the Soviet Union, especially after the military purges that had severely weakened the Red Army. Therefore, creating a buffer zone by pushing Soviet borders westward was a highly strategic measure. This would mean that, in the event of a German invasion, there would be more territory to absorb the enemy advance, giving Soviet defenses time to mobilize. Another factor was Stalin's long-held dream of recovering territories lost in the Great War. After the 1917 revolution and the Russian Civil War, Russia lost significant territories. Stalin saw the situation as an opportunity to reclaim some of these areas, especially those with ethnic Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian populations. Political and ideological considerations also weighed in, as Poland was not only a troublesome neighbor but also a potential adversary. The Soviet-Polish War between 1919 and 1921, which resulted in defeat for the Soviet Union, was still fresh in the memory. Neutralizing Poland and eliminating this threat was strategic. Furthermore, although not a priority, expanding Soviet influence could facilitate the spread of socialism in Eastern Europe. And finally, with the pact, Stalin hoped to gain precious time to strengthen the Soviet army, modernize equipment, and reorganize military command, preparing for a confrontation he saw as inevitable. At that time, the Soviet Union was technologically very advanced in areas such as armored vehicles, but Stalin needed time for his gigantic army to properly assimilate these technologies. With the pact signed with Germany, Stalin also promised to give him this much-needed time. On September 17, 1939, while Poland was already desperately fighting the German invasion that began on September 1st, Soviet troops crossed Poland's eastern border. The Soviet invasion completely sealed Poland's fate. The country was divided between Germany and the Soviet Union, disappearing from the map as an independent nation. This joint action not only facilitated the territorial expansion of both countries but also sent a clear signal to the world about the new order that was emerging in Europe. Taking advantage of this momentum, the Soviet Union further expanded its borders. In 1940, the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were annexed after pressure and political maneuvering. Romania also ceded territories such as Bessarabia and northern Bukovina under threat of Soviet invasion. In November 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland, beginning the Winter War. Despite expecting a quick victory, the Soviets encountered fierce resistance. Finland was eventually forced to cede territory, but the war exposed the Red Army's weaknesses and exacted a high human and morale toll on the Soviet Union. During the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the Soviet Union supplied Germany with vital resources such as oil, grain, and metals, which fueled the Nazi war machine. In return, the Soviet Union received industrial and military equipment, strengthening its own capabilities. But despite the pact, distrust between the two countries never disappeared. Stalin received intelligence reports about German intentions, but in a mixture of denial and strategic calculation, he underestimated the imminent threat. Meanwhile, Germany planned Operation Barbarossa, the colossal invasion of the Soviet Union with 3.8 million men. Regarding the Soviet invasion of Poland, we must also address a crucial point: the moral aspects of the Soviet decision to invade that country. The Soviet Union's invasion of Poland was an unprovoked aggression against a sovereign country. This action violated international law and existing treaties, setting a dangerous precedent for the use of force in relations between nations. By signing the pact and cooperating with Nazi Germany, Stalin associated the Soviet Union with a regime responsible for grave atrocities and genocidal policies. This temporary alliance contradicted Soviet anti-fascist rhetoric and compromised its moral credibility on the international stage. In the occupied Polish territories, the Soviet regime implemented brutally repressive policies. Thousands of Poles were deported to gulags in Siberia. The Katyn massacre in 1940, where some 22,000 Polish officers, intellectuals, and leaders were executed by the NKVD, is one of the darkest examples of Stalin's atrocities in Poland. The civilian population suffered terribly. Families were separated, property confiscated, and there was a systematic attempt to suppress Polish national identity. These actions generated deep and lasting resentments, the scars of which are felt to this day. In short, the Soviet Union's invasion of Poland in 1939 was a calculated move that had profound repercussions on the course of the war. While Stalin sought to strengthen his strategic position and buy time against an inevitable German threat, his actions contributed to the suffering of millions and to instability in Eastern Europe. Until June 1941, the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany maintained a tense relationship, marked by both cooperation and distrust. Operation Barbarossa, launched by Germany on June 22, 1941, shattered this pact and plunged the Soviet Union into a devastating conflict. Stalin's decisions in this early period of the war remind us of the complexities of international politics, where strategic decisions often conflict with moral and ethical considerations.
Cheese!